Welcome to this year's Docs Equinox program running online at Hamptons DocFest from April 22nd, which happens to be Earth Day, through Sunday, April 25th. Although you might know Fisher Stevens best as an actor, most recently in the successful television series Succession, he's also a producer and a director of films on environmental issues. His lineup of films include the Academy Award-winning documentary The Cove and last year's breakout hit series Tiger King. We're thrilled to have Fisher Stevens in conversation with filmmaker Roger Sherman of Florentine Films.
So I'm very happy, Fisher Stevens, that you're here, and your film And We Go Green is part of the Doc Equinox series. I really enjoyed it. It was dramatic. It was surprising. It had lots of twists and turns and not just on the track. And the Pope, you got the Pope? I mean, come on. And the ending was like you wrote it. Now, wait a minute. You're a narrative filmmaker too, right? And congrats on Palmer with Justin Timberlake, which came out last year. So do you want to come clean and admit that this was actually a narrative film that you wrote?
It really, it was complete. It's not really a documentary, but that's my style. I make it seem like a documentary, and it wasn't. No. I only work with the Pope also. By the way, he's been in 2 of my movies. He was in Before the Flood as well. And both times I was shut out right before it came to meeting him. I don't know. He must have looked at my resume. But no, it was one of those crazy lucky things where when you start a film about a competition, you're sort of betting on a couple of characters, and I happened to bet right at the beginning. And Alejandro Agag, the Spaniard with the cigar, when I asked him at the beginning who I should focus on, he never mentioned Tachita. He never mentioned Jeb or Andre. I don't think he thought they had a shot to win that year.
Weren't they among the top contenders every year?
No.
Oh.
Jeb finished, I think he finished in like 4th place one year, and Andre was a rookie. So, or maybe Jeb might have come in 3rd, but no. And also I think he thought Jeb was a hothead and that he was emotionally never going to be able to pull it off. So Jeb proved him wrong, and actually Jeb went on to win the next year afterwards. So,
so how many drivers did you actually follow and film?
I keyed on 4 drivers. I keyed on 4.
And there are four drivers in the film.
Yeah, those were them.
So nobody got cut out. Usually we try to hedge our bets and I'm sorry, you're not good enough. But boy, you really have, I can see the little halo over there. That's
yes. Godlike. No, we just got lucky. I mean, to be honest, Sam Bird, the British driver who ended up, I picked him right early on, and I felt he was a bit boring. And I kind of got off him a little bit, but fortunately I did do like a big, huge, massive interview with him at the beginning. But as soon as I'd say week 6 or week 5, I was like, I got to get him back in. But otherwise, it was really PK, Degrassi, Jeb, and Bird was where I was focusing. Yeah.
And how many crews did you have following the drivers? I know you got access to the dozens of cameras that the Formula E were shooting themselves, which in itself is on the one hand, a wonderful thing. On the other hand, your editors must have gone crazy with all the footage.
I had most of the time I would have 2 crews at the races. Sometimes I would have 1 crew. And then for the final race and for Paris, I had 3 crews. I wanted Paris to be a big event. Jeb also, who was my main guy, was from Paris. I knew there was a lot to cover there. The race in the streets of Paris in front of Invalid. I mean, it was like magical. I mean, it was a great job for me. I got to go all over the world and meet all these great people, but it was not easy at first to crack the nuts of literally of these drivers. They were very media savvy, media trained. So I had to really kind of dig in there and push them as much as I possibly could to make it interesting.
Yeah. So what did you do to do that? You know, I've interviewed people that are also media savvy that have told their story 1,000 times, and you've got to think, how can I crack that? So what was your strategy?
Well, I throw them a lot of curveballs when I interview them, and I try to, I mean, there's something really lucky about being an actor that they've seen sort of in movies, even though I'm not like a famous actor, but I was very familiar to them in a weird way. They felt comfortable with me. They felt, you know, they'd seen a bunch of my documentaries as well. So I think they really wanted to be good for me in one way and knew this was like an opportunity not to be. And to be honest, I would ask them a question, and if they answered it like a savvy media trained driver, I either would not use it or I would say, come on, man, you can do better than that. You know, come on. This isn't ESPN. This isn't Canal Plus, you know. So I would push them a bit. But listen, also I filmed with them on and off for 8 months. So by the end, we were like bros, you know. I still text with Jeb and Bird and Degrassi. So, yeah.
Good. So were you interested in cars and racing as a kid growing up, or is this a new?
I couldn't give a shit about cars, about racing. I hated racing because of the gas, because of the motorheads. I didn't learn to drive till I was in my 20s. I'm a terrible driver. I've trashed many cars. But I love green energy. I'm fascinated by the environmental aspects of this. I love sports. I follow British soccer like religiously. I follow the NBA religiously. Just got my Nets season tickets. But I love competition. I love sports. I asked my friend Malcolm Venville to join me on this journey because Malcolm wanted to be a race car driver. B, he's probably directed some of the best car commercials you've ever seen, and most famous. And also his dad worked in Birmingham in an automobile factory, grew up in Birmingham, England, which was the Detroit of England for cars. So Malcolm joined me, and he was my kind of help in terms of the sport, the history of Formula One, and the actual technology. So Malcolm was great help, and he'd never done a documentary, so he was really interested in that form. Of course, it didn't pay anything like his commercials, sadly. So he would constantly be going off and doing a commercial for the same salary that barely, he'd make more in a week in a commercial than he made in a year and a half on this film. But yeah.
Co-directing can be a very fraught relationship. How did you work that out? What did you decide you're going to be in charge of this and you're going to be in charge of that? Or were you, wearing the same jacket all the time and you were always...
Well, no, it was a little different because actually Malcolm, like visually, I trusted him. I would say he made the big decision to go anamorphic lenses, and he helped hire a lot of the DPs that he'd worked with on commercials. And, just in terms of the explaining the sport, he was very helpful. I would say the movie, Malcolm lives in London and I live in New York, and we edited in New York, and I kind of ran the post out of it and used one of my editors that I work with. And so it worked very well in this instance. I could tell sometimes it might be difficult, but he's also one of my best friends. So we had
Did you both interview?
No, we did, but not when we were together. Basically, I would interview, and then Malcolm would come in at the end. But or if I wasn't there, Malcolm would interview, or if he wasn't there, I would. By the way, there were races that I couldn't go to because I was working, So he would cover, and he couldn't go to, and so I covered. So
That works.
we needed it, but also the fact that I'd made a lot of documentaries and he hadn't made any. And now I think, it would be very different for Malcolm. He's gotten a lot more experience and like that.
So let's step back a second. You've done a bunch of environmental films. How did this come about? Did the Formula E's come to you? I know Leonardo DiCaprio is credited as a producer, and he's great the way he talks about things in there. Was it his idea? Where did it originate?
Yeah, it was Leo's idea. Leo was in New York. He lives partly in New York, and he called me to go see a race in Brooklyn the season before because they raced there.
Yeah, Red Hook.
Yeah, in Red Hook. And he said, look, man, make a movie of this. And I wasn't sold at all. By the way, I wasn't interested. And then I met Alejandro, and I was like, wow, this guy's a trip, man. And then I got to watch the cars quietly going around Red Hook, and I was like, this is visually fucking cool, like visually amazing. And then Leo convinced Alejandro to fly me, and that's when I called Malcolm because he lives in London. So we met in Valencia, where they were doing the final tryouts before they were going to start the season. And I basically met with all the drivers, and that's when I saw Jev and Degrassi, and that's when I was like, okay, this could be really fun.
This is a film.
This is a film. But it was Leo's idea to do it. And it was our second film together. And, we're always trying to figure out an environmental film to do.
And I thought that the environmental portion of it was really, really, really important. The advances in technologies and batteries and how that's going to inform what we drive every day. I don't think people really know that, all the racing, NASCAR and everything ends up in our cars as the Army and the military things like GPS ended up in our pockets. And did you have to push on that, or was that just a natural, easy thing, the environmental part?
Well, no, it was difficult to cut. I filmed a lot more, made a lot more, had many more scenes about it. It was difficult to shoehorn some of it into the movie because I tended to get a little nerded out and go a little more into that than it just couldn't sustain.
Right.
Because I'm also following the season. So it was very tricky.
I think it worked very well. Yes, we could always have more, but there's a point where the audience is saying, what kind of film is this? Is this just an environmental film? Is it just, I thought you balanced it well. And I was, And We Go Green. By the way, we often have trouble figuring out titles for films. Doesn't sound like there was any problem at all, especially since the title was announced at least 12 times. I know. The beginning of every race.
I know, it was good. We got lucky. I know.
What about shooting on the track, in the pits, that kind of stuff? I know those guys are working their ass off, and they would just as soon run you, knock you over to get to what they're doing. Did you have issues with the Formula E folks on what to do, on trust, on that kind of stuff? I know when I did a film on celebrating the 100th anniversary of Chevrolet, and we wanted to film a NASCAR race, there was so many obstacles, including approval of the footage, and they would get to own our footage and $1 jillion for the access.
Wow. Well, we definitely had to gain their trust, and one of my cameramen almost lost his legs when a car crashed in the pits. We were really lucky. And actually, he ended up shooting Palmer, so it worked. He was fine.
You had to give him Palmer to make up for it?
No, he's a brilliant Tobias Schleisler. He's like, he shot Friday Night Lights and, Dreamgirls and Ma Rainey's Black Box. He's amazing. Anyway, It was a trust game. There were these great guys, these kind of track guards that we earned their trust. I love them, Gary and Larry, and they were characters at one point too. I loved them so much. I filmed with them, but so many people we couldn't keep up. So yeah, it was again, it took time, but we really, by the last few races, we were right in there, and they were wonderful. I love those people, man. I love the people that work there, and it was a beautiful experience. It was just one of those things also, unfortunately, that it came out during COVID, right when it started, but it wasn't like, I had that come out and Tiger King at the same time. And Tiger King, like, obviously, not to compare the two, they're so different, but Tiger King, obviously, COVID helped, and this one, COVID didn't help, getting it out there. So.
Yeah, wow. Well, let's wrap up. What are you working on? Can you tell us?
Well, I'm working quite a bit as an actor on the TV show Succession. Not that it's the biggest part, but it's great. I get to be around, and I'm in it much more this season. And I'm working on a 4-part series, doc series about the Lincoln Project.
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, so I've been cutting that. I can't tell you yet where it's going to be, but we're going to be on a streamer. And I'm excited about those things. And
Great. Great. Well, Fisher Stevens, the director of And We Go Green, thank you so much for being part of our Hamptons Doc Fest Docs Equinox, which I hope everybody watches. And we look forward to following you and seeing the next film.
Thank you, Roger. Great to meet you. And I hope
nice to meet you.
Next time we do this in person, I hope.
Me too. That would be great. Take good care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.